Alright, I have to say it. This episode probably feels like one of the most confusing type episodes I have done in a while. Normally, I've been doing this whole thing where like a lot of the things in the episode sort of just line up, but this time it just feels a little bit different because this is an episode that's going to be focused solely on men, but it's going to be giving advice to the women. It's supposed to be discussing things that are particularly serious, but there's an incident of someone doing some very funny shit on an airplane. Like, all of this is very, very weirdly placed. Very, very weirdly placed. But I am going to start things off and hopefully things should start to line up over the course of the episode. So let me just get into it because I have a bunch of statistics. Actually, two different statistics, but they both relate to men, so I'm just gonna bring it here. So the first statistic says, and I quote, 7% of men think they can beat a grizzly bear in a fight, while 23% believe that they can beat a king cobra, according to a new survey, which I find to be very, very weird. How the fuck do you think that you'd have a much better chance with a king cobra as opposed to a grizzly bear? Like with a grizzly bear, I'd probably want to run and like lock the door behind me and then pull out a gun and shoot them. But with a king cobra, what the fuck are you going to do if you're in that situation? Like get a sword and hopefully manage to slash that shit? But anyways, that statistic almost has nothing in comparison to this next one that I'm about to bring here. Now, apparently, according to very recent statistics from Gallup, it says, and I quote, nearly 20% of the US's population of Gen Z is a part of the LGBT, which is roughly about 1 in 5 people. And if you actually think about that practically, the first question that you'd probably want to ask is, actually, no, that's not the question that I think most of y'all would probably be asking. The question that I'm sure some of you would be asking is,
why are you gay?
Because honestly, nearly 20%, like they actually make up the largest proportion of LGBT US adults that actually exist as per the survey, because the total percentage of US American adults who identify as LGBT as per this survey is actually about 7.2%. And 19.7% of them are Gen Zs. The next largest number are the millennials at 11.2%, so a margin of about 8.5%. Then the Gen Xers are the next ones at 3.3%, then 2.7% for baby boomers and 1.7% for the traditionalists, who are pretty much anyone born before the year 1946. So you kind of have to think about it. Either Gen Zs are so comfortable coming out about their sexuality, or there's a fuck ton of Gen Zs that have suddenly decided to come out and call themselves a part of the LGBT, whether it's actually true or not. Because, and this is a theory that I have, which by all means it's not backed up by anything, it's literally just me pulling it out of my ass, a lot of these Gen Z LGBTQ people are actually not running by the whole, gay by birth type of concept. A lot of them have sort of been primed and sort of been assimilated into the whole thing. Maybe this is just a me thing, because on one end, it's actually sort of become almost like the in thing to become a marginalized person for some reason. And also, they've been sprinkling a lot of LGBT in a lot of things that they're doing. So from the classrooms where I don't think there's been a lot of Gen Zs, but also when you look at the entertainment that we see nowadays, like Netflix shows almost have a mandatory there must be a gay person on the series type thing. Same thing with Hollywood movies nowadays. So for a lot of people, I guess it's become sort of like a thing that they might have been primed into, even though they might probably not have known about it. But anyways, I can argue that a little bit later because I have a podcast that I need to get into, and this story wasn't supposed to go on for this long. So without further ado, let me start it in a more normal way, kinda like when you open the door for guests and you start by saying, welcome to Breaktime on West Side, your number one Breaktime podcast, coming to you from Nairobi, Kenya. The man on the mic is a man who still believes that he can kill a grizzly bear, probably because he's been dealing with a lot of poom-pooms that are super huge. He is a man whose sickness for the thickness prevents him from skinny dipping. It is none other than your tall, dark, and mildly handsome man, Sir Denver B. The show is Tweet Street, the show where we take a deep dive into Twitter, pull up a couple of tweets and break them down a little bit. Now, as usual, if you know the drill, then you can repeat it after me. If you don't know the drill, it's okay, I'ma say it for you. And if you do know the drill but you're not saying anything, it's still okay, because it's not about saying the tweet, it's about how you get to become a participant of the podcast by submitting in tweets that you've written or that you've seen someone else write that have ended up on Twitter or any other social media platform. And to do it, it's super easy. It almost sounds like a song, and it's a very simple drill, and it goes like this. You see that tweet, you like that tweet, you want us to discuss that tweet, you send that tweet. You send it to the DMs of @BagakaTheD, which happens to be my personal Twitter handle, and I will take it from there and I will handle it accordingly. On Facebook and on IG, if it happens to be a screenshot, a screen grab, or even a reel that ended up on any one of those platforms but had a tweet in it, then the place to send it to is @BreakTime on my side on Facebook or on IG. The DMs are always open, and I will take it from there and handle it accordingly. Now, we have a very interesting episode revolving around men, but also giving advice to women, even though it's going to entirely be about men. So I am going to get to that in a little bit. But before I do that, we need to address something that men do that is mostly supposed to be private, but can sometimes be taken to the wrong places at the wrong time. And the culprit that I am bringing in because of this is none other than the rapper known as Desiigner. For those of you all that don't remember who or what Desiigner is, Desiigner was the guy who was behind the 2016 hit known as Panda. And if you're in Kenya, when he came, we stole his sneakers and he complained about it when he was on stage. But anyways, that aside, so apparently Desiigner is being charged with indecent exposure after allegedly masturbating on a plane, which is very, very wild, because this is Desiigner, he's a rapper. So the worst offense that you'd actually think you'd catch him doing on a plane is probably smoking some weed or banging one of the flight attendants in the washroom. Like, that sounds like something that a rapper would do, not masturbate. Come on, bruh. But anyways, let me read the story for y'all just so that we can get this one out the way and understand how everything happened. So the story reads, and I quote, "Desiigner is officially facing legal trouble for exposing himself on an airplane. The feds say he masturbated in front of flight attendants mid-flight and seemed pretty nonchalant about it. According to legal documents obtained by TMZ, the rapper is being charged with indecent exposure, and the paperwork sheds more light on last week's bizarre incident, saying he had his penis out while sitting in first class of the Delta flight and was masturbating while in his seat. Flight attendants allegedly told him multiple times to stop, and he eventually was taken to the back of the plane while he was monitored by two of his friends. The FBI affidavit says a jar of Vaseline dropped into the aisle as he was getting up to switch seats. After landing in Minneapolis, authorities say they spoke with Desiigner, who told them it all happened because he quote-unquote didn't really get much cootie while in Japan and was brick hard when he got on the plane. According to the documents, Desiigner said he was aroused by the flight attendant and kind of showed her the magic stick, thinking it would give her quote-unquote encouragement. By the way, Desiigner claimed he wasn't under the influence, saying he was prescribed meds in Thailand but hadn't been taking them. According to the documents, he didn't appear to be impaired during the interview with the FBI. End quote. Okay, I have a bunch of questions here because some of them just need to be asked. Like, first of all, my nigga, you're a whole ass rapper. You're not a broke person. It's not like your flight was like paid for by Omaze or some shit. Why the fuck are you using Vaseline to jack off on a plane? Like, I don't know, maybe it's just me. I'd be thinking that he'd probably be having some premium tier hand lotion with him to do that shit. You know, the soft stuff. You know, the stuff that would make you feel all nice and everything, like you're getting premium coochie or some shit like that. But Vaseline? Like, I know it's a standard, but come on, bruh. Like, really? Then secondly, why do it while you're on the plane? Like, not necessarily like on the plane, but like while you're seated. And yes, I get it, it's a first class seating, but why do it there instead of just going to the bathroom? Like, I bet the first class bathrooms are probably even better, or even though it's just the regular people's bathrooms, it would probably be better than just doing it while you're seated. Then also, how the hell does he not find coochie in Japan? Like, I'm not saying that, you know, there's a bunch of wild bitches in Japan that are always willing to give a black dude, but like, how do you miss good pussy in Japan? Like, that shit don't make sense to me. I'm sure there has to be a host somewhere or some virtual like dick sucking machine that he could have just gone and worn VR goggles and watched his favorite porno while, you know, it was sucking him off or some shit. But you're telling me that he didn't get anything in Japan? Not even a sex toy? Like, come on, Brad. I don't know, maybe he was expecting some Meg Thee Stallion type babes and he didn't find them, and it was a while since he was in the ATL, so probably he was waiting all the way until he got there, but he was a little too hard for comfort. Because, you know, just like he says in the very first verse of Panda, I got broads in Atlanta. So maybe he forgot to carry one of them. You know, at least one would have probably sucked him off. But unfortunately, since that wasn't particularly the case, now the guy has to go on social media and start claiming that it's been a mental health issue and he's seeking some sort of assistance for it, medically speaking. Although at the same time, I do know of a psychological condition known as exhibitionism, which is sort of close to what it was that he was doing. But since I can't completely vouch for that, I'm just gonna ask one question. Does it mean that he's officially a part of the Mile High Club? Because it was self-love, but still technically it's like sex because the guy may or may not have nutted or some shit. But it involved some shit with his dick. I don't know. Maybe you guys can tell me, but either way, I'm gonna leave things as they are right now because I can't milk any more out of it, you know, kinda like his Vaseline couldn't out of him, and I will move things on. So with this particular episode, I'm doing things a little bit differently, kinda like the same way I was doing towards the end of last season, where I would pick one topic which people have given their inputs in, and I'll pretty much just go on it. Now, this particular topic is men only, give the ladies some relationship advice. Now, I randomly chose a couple of different tweets that I felt were particularly impactful, and I'll see if I can do probably about 3 or 4 on this episode, then maybe I can do some others on a different one. So I'm gonna move things on to the very first one. So on to our very first tweet of this episode. Your past matters. No matter how much y'all try to shame men online for not wanting a woman with a promiscuous past, it'll never change the fact that men don't typically want them. You're not sexually nor romantically involved with your friends, so stop listening to them. Don't tell me what a real man is willing to accept. I'm not one of them. Shame another nigga into accepting that bullshit. Okay, first of all, this real man bullshit needs to stop. Like, even before I started recording, I was having a discussion with a babe on IG and she was busy talking about real man this, real man that. Like, come on, bruh, you cannot keep talking about real men this, real men that, and you're not even a dude. Plus, whatever it is that you're claiming real men do is just stuff that benefits you. But anyways, that aside, now on to what was particularly being like centered on, which is a woman's past matching, or your past matters as a person. I totally believe that shit. Not because it's a talking point that guys have had and I'm not a fan of like a woman with a high body count or anything. No, it's actually a general statement. The problem is that whenever people talk about this, or more so whenever guys talk about this, it's mostly in relation to a woman and sleeping around. To which, yes, I actually agree with that. Because a lot of us guys actually do value a woman with a low body count, especially when you go up the social status ladders. Like, the lower the body count, the better. At least if you're looking at a guy that would want to settle down with you. And we can probably do the whole back and forth about if it's real or not, whether it should be considered and what its importance is and everything. But I digress. I'll sort of leave that one aside. Because while guys will mostly center on that, I think it applies to more than just a woman's body count and her sleeping around and her sexual and relationship activities. I think it'll relate to how she was brought up, such that you can sort of look at her outlook on men and how she's supposed to be treated by a man, what she expects from men, then also her behaviors and her personality, which are very easily determined by a woman's past. So her ability to cook and clean, whether she believes that she should be treated a certain kind of way, or what it is that she's willing to do for a man and shit like that. Like, a lot of those things are actually based off of a woman's past. And if she doesn't have good past experiences, or if you can find out from someone else and they're like, oh, this babe doesn't cook, doesn't clean, then it can pretty easily write her off as a good potential partner to go long term with. You can look at other things, because yes, someone can be like, oh, you know, those are things that she can learn. but her outlook on men might actually be something that might not be easily changeable. And there's a lot of other things that will be drawn from a woman's past that need to be considered. So I actually do agree with this, and in as much as a lot of guys will center it on the body count and sleeping around, and a lot of babes say that a woman's past shouldn't matter, it actually does. Just because you think that you've gotten past whatever it is that you were going through as a kid doesn't mean that we think that you're done with all your traumas. And some of your traumas can manifest some very nasty shit that we would like to avoid. But either way, whether you'd like to acknowledge or dismiss the advice that's given, this is men's advice that I can actually stand by. So I'm gonna leave it at that and I'm gonna move it on. So on to our very next tweet of this episode. Number 1, don't marry a man that you cannot see as a father to your children. 2, avoid visionless men. 3, be his peace. Most guys are not difficult. We only want peace of mind and respect. 4, don't be with a guy for what he is, rather for what he can be. 5, no guy is perfect. Okay, let's see if I can break some of these ones down particularly quickly. 1, don't marry a man that you cannot see as a father to your children. This one I totally agree with, whether or not you're trying to have kids, because that option is very, very possible to change in someone's life given a couple of experiences or a certain amount of time, or even influence from society as well as family. So if you can get yourself a man that can possibly be a good father to your kids, then by all means that is very, very gold. Number 2, avoid visionless men. That one is mostly self-explanatory. Number 3, be his peace. Most guys are not difficult. We only want peace of mind and respect. Of which I'll even add good food and good pussy, or at least ass. So the thing with guys is we're particularly simple people to actually treat nicely by a babe, because a lot of what it is that we want, we get it externally, but there's things that we get from babes that we can only get from a babe that we definitely care about. So things like, good respect in the household, things like, good treatment, things like good pussy, like shit like those are things that we can definitely get from out there, but we'd much rather get from our own woman, because, shagging a hoe at some point is going to become a little bit of an expense. Also, it can be particularly annoying. But all in all, we do want to have a good woman that can respect us, that can treat us nicely, that can even encourage us and just, give us peace of mind, good food, and pussy. That's it. Like, guys are very, very easy to please. Then number 4, don't be with a guy for what he is, rather for what he can be. This one I don't entirely agree with, because sometimes people can sell you on a dream. So I'd much rather say at least observe the guy for a while. If you can actually see that the guy is moving towards that trajectory, then get with them. But if not, you can drop them, I guess. But all in all, yes, being with a guy for what he is, rather for what he can be, I think is something that is very subjective. I'll always say observe the guy for a little bit, because sometimes in a lot of the endeavors that guys will get into, you need a little bit of luck for you to actually go a very long way. So you can choose to be the guy for what he is right now or for what he can be, but either way, just be smart in how you choose to play your cards. Then the 5th one is pretty self-explanatory. No guy is perfect. I don't think I really need to say too much about that, because a lot of babes think that they can find the perfect guy, but there's always supposed to be a trade-off somewhere. So if you can find that trade-off as a babe, good for you. Anyways, I 95 to 99% agree with what advice has been given here, so I'm gonna leave it at that and move it on. So on to our very last tweet of this episode. The nigga who is already showing good habits and qualities is definitely gonna pan out better than the nigga you want to show those qualities. Don't bet on the future. Believe the early signs. And this is not to say that the other option is irredeemable, because I do believe humans have the ability to improve, and that's life. But 9 out of 10 times, people gonna show you who they are immediately. Interestingly enough, I actually sort of agree with this. It sounded like a contradiction from the past tweet, which I sort of tried to clarify before I came to this one, but it does still sort of hold quite a bit of weight. Because I remember there's a statement that was made, which I put up on Raw Zone, but I'm not sure if I deleted it from the final cut or not, where some person said that women don't want Russell Wilson, they want Future to behave like Russell Wilson. Which, when I think about it a lot of times, it is actually particularly true. Because the belief that this toxic person can start treating you well because it's you and you're the person that's made them change is something that a lot of babes want, and I've never fully understood why. Like, this idea of changing a guy and making him better because you see potential in him, oh no. Like, I'll never really understand that with babes, because I've never seen, okay, not never, but I don't normally see guys just sitting by and they're like, yo, you know what? I know this chick is a hoe and a lot of you people have been running through her, but I was talking to her recently and she sounds like a really sweet babe. And if she was someone's girlfriend, she'd be really good. So I think I'm gonna take my chances on her. Like, I never really hear dudes say that. Like, I've seen dudes play Captain Saberho, but I've never really heard a dude say, you know what, I'm gonna try and save this hoe. Mostly because us guys will probably clown the dude, but either way, like, even for us guys, we know, even though a babe is nice, if a shorty is a hoe, there's only so much that you can do. And yes, I know, even guys sometimes take stupid shots at very toxic babes, thinking that the babes will change for them or the babes aren't really what it is that we say they are. And a lot of times the word of the homies goes undefeated. But at the end of the day, the rule is particularly still the same. If you have a nice babe, go for the nice babe. If there's a nice dude that wants to be with you, go for the nice dude. If you're looking at it from the long term. If you're looking at some of these other people and you're trying to look for potential, yet you can clearly see it's a toxic person, from the initial stage especially, then stop trying to change someone. Like, the only thing you should be trying to change on them probably is underwear or hairstyles or some shit close to that. But the person internally, that change has to come from them, and it has to be influenced by them and not even you. Because in probably about 9 out of 10 times, you will find that if you as an external influence have influenced a certain person to change, that change is going to be temporary. A lot of times babes will be like, oh, you know, I made him start doing this because of this. Either dude has actually been working on that change and you came in at just the right time before he made the change, or this guy had probably already made that change but you just didn't notice it yet. But still, at the end of the day, you do not get to influence someone to change who they are internally. That shit has to come from them themselves wanting to do it by themselves without you having to be an influence for it. But then again, I might be wrong about this particular one, even though I totally agree with the advice, but I want your thoughts on it. The DMs are open. On Twitter, it is at BagakaTheD. On Facebook and on IG, it is at Breaktime on my side. Thank you so much for listening all the way till the end, and I will catch you guys on the next break.